as you can see right now, I am about to play one of Louis Rossmann's videos. And the purpose of this video is about something that I'm not going to discuss because what he talks about, at least what the main purpose of the video is, I think is pretty important. But he says something at the beginning, which I think is equally important. And all of this is about holding companies accountable. So before I continue, I'll go ahead and play the video.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're having a lovely day. In today's episode of It's a Consumer Unfriendly World, we're going to be looking at Samsung, who has decided to shove a forced arbitration clause down the throats of their customers via a software update. This comes from Samsung, and it appears to include a mandatory individual arbitration provision. Louis, check out this stupidity. Samsung requires software updates and you can't opt out of them. Last update, they removed control of shutting off 5G data, which was already in a hidden menu. I live in South Carolina and 5G sucks here. This time, they're forcing some arbitration clause and say you waive the right to a jury trial on their website. You don't own your Samsung device, and if you want to fight for it, you have to go to arbitrators that are literally paid by Samsung. So the inability to turn off 5G data is something that really does suck. Whether I'm using AT&T or T-Mobile, it doesn't matter. Across the country, very often 5G sucks. If you turn off 5G and tell your phone to use LTE only, you will go from a connection that gets you sometimes 5 megabytes per second, sometimes 8 kilobytes per second, to a connection that gives you a steady 300 to 800 kilobytes per second. And I tend to prefer the connection that gives me a steady connection, even if it's a little bit slower, than a connection that can sometimes be really fast and sometimes be almost dial-up. This is, in my opinion, even more offensive than that. So let's read it.
So right there, what he's talking about is an arbitration thing that Samsung is forcing its customers to abide by or to agree in order to install a software update. Yeah, that's pretty crummy, and that's what his video is about. So by all means, please go finish watching that. But what he and I guess whoever sent him that message said is that Samsung made it so that you can't turn off 5G on your device. And I must say that it's important, one, that the viewer didn't mention what service provider they had. They just said 5G sucks here. We only really have 3 companies, but I want to loosely say that T-Mobile is doing somewhat better of a job than the other 2 companies. 5G sucks on your company's network, but it might not suck for somebody else. So I think that's important that we get full context of what this viewer is talking about. Also, I don't think Louis has a Samsung device. I mean, I think he's talked about in the past he used to have them, but as of late, I'm pretty sure he's using a Pixel. So whatever settings that this viewer is referring to, I don't think Louis directly has firsthand knowledge of to confirm that what that person is saying is actually correct. I've seen this video before, and I kind of didn't pay much attention to it in terms of really caring. I've had Samsung devices in the past, and usually I'm just like, Samsung, something that they do about their version of Android, I really just don't like. So I kind of just put it on the back burner. But at some point in time, I started thinking to myself, well, maybe I would like to try the S23. I did have the S22 and the S22 Plus, and I didn't really like either one of them, but I said, hey, let me just give it a try. But what came to my mind is what was said right here. You can't turn off 5G. And for all the phones that I've used since 5G has been a thing, whether it's Android or iOS, I turn off 5G. And for Samsung to make it so that it can't do it, I thought that was kind of weird. And I really thought to myself, like, well, what's the advantage for Samsung to make it so that you can't turn off 5G? It's just like I don't see any reason why they would do that. I don't see any benefit for them to disable something like that. So I ended up buying a S23. I put my SIM card in it. And when I got it, because it was a used device, the security patch level or whatever was still May of this year. And I say, okay, well, this video came out 2 weeks ago. So let me see right now if I'm using the May update, can I turn off 5G? Go into settings, boom, can turn off 5G. Then I updated it to June and July, and I didn't test it with June, but I did test it with July. And I am still able to turn off 5G. So what does this mean? This means that I don't think Samsung is to blame for making it so that you can't turn off 5G. I'm not saying Samsung is not a garbage company, because that's, Louis's opinion. My opinion of Samsung is to be determined. But what we need to do is place blame where it needs to be placed. So the setting is in the phone. Samsung, when they made their version of Android, they included that setting and said, hey, some users may want to turn off 5G. Heck, and hopefully I'll have a screenshot on the screen right now. You can even turn off 2G, so that way you're only operating or only have the option to operate at 3G or 4G or LTE settings or speeds. So Samsung is like, hey, our users like the ability to actually do things with their phone, so let's include this particular setting amongst a bunch of other settings in their devices. But yeah, being able to turn off 5G isn't something that hurts or helps Samsung. So it's just, hey, we want our customers to have a good experience. When I think about the path that a software update goes, not just the app, but the entire operating system, it's not as simple as it should be. So at a minimum, and there might be some other people in there, some other companies, because Qualcomm might need to get involved as well. But just three people that I can think of, or three companies that are there just by default, or at least that should come to your mind, is okay. Android is a Google thing, so Android needs to go through Google first, or I'll say it comes from Google first. Then your device manufacturer does do something to it. Usually they put their spin on it, a skin or whatever, or just tweak a few things in there. So next, it needs to go to Samsung. Okay. And then after that, it needs to go to your mobile device carrier before it actually releases you. They need to validate and probably do some additional tweaks to make sure that it works the way that they want it to work on their network. And in this particular situation, they don't want you not using 5G. So for AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile, whoever it might be, it would not surprise me. And in my case, I feel like I'm showing that Samsung is not turning off the ability to turn off 5G. That customer, they need to be blaming the cell phone service provider. And the first time that something like this was brought to my attention was back when we started getting more and more unlimited data options again, when they started returning. And I noticed, if you're doing the whole compare, that some of them did not allow, well, they wouldn't say they didn't allow you to have mobile hotspot. It just would be omitted from the listing of the perks for that particular plan. Because you look at the base plan and you say, okay, it gives you all these things. And you look at the next plan up for an unlimited plan. And you say, oh, well, in this unlimited plan, I get 5 gigabytes of mobile hotspot. So I was like, okay, well, that's weird. So clearly something is happening for them to be able to change the way that your phone is intended to operate. A mobile hotspot has been available on devices for quite some time. And if you look at those particular unlimited plans, you'll say, well, okay, well, how exactly are you going to make it so that I can't use the mobile hotspot on the phone that I'm using that I paid for? I was living out in Los Angeles, and my brother came through, and I was having some issues with my home internet, and he needed to do something for work. So, he had his phone, had his laptop, and he was like, oh, yeah, I'll just use my mobile hotspot. So he goes into settings, and he's like, how do I turn it on? And I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean? And he's like, I don't see an option to turn on the mobile hotspot. So I look at my phone, because I was also using an iPhone at the time, I believe, and I say, oh, well, look, I can toggle my mobile hotspot on and off, but you can't. So I think at that point in time, I was using T-Mobile, and he was using AT&T. So I let him know, okay, so AT&T is adjusting the settings in your phone to make it so that you can't do something that the phone was intended to do. So in this situation, AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile or whoever is doing the exact same thing. They are turning off a toggle, or in fact, they just make it so it disappears. It's just not even visible for you to turn that particular setting off. In this video setting, it's the option to turn 5G on or off. In my brother's situation, it was the ability to turn on or off his mobile hotspot. So, as I said before, it is very important that we hold all companies accountable. But in a situation like this, it's important that we place the blame where it belongs. Samsung, for this one particular issue, not the issue of Lewis's video, but for this particular issue in terms of being able to toggle 5G on or off, it's not their fault. blame your mobile service provider. They are the ones that are going into the settings and making things disappear.